all know that without having athletes, we wouldn't need coaches. But when do we need coaches? So somebody taught you how to row, and it will have been a coach, and they may not have called themselves a coach. They may have felt they were just a helper or a fellow competitor who helped you out, but somebody taught you how to row and probably gave you a love and a passion for it as well. And then if we want to go on in our rowing careers and progress perhaps from being a beginner to learning how to race, then again, we need to make sure that we have a coach in place, and probably someone now with a little bit more knowledge, which enables them to put together a program, a longitudinal program that enables us to move forward. And then if we want to perform in rowing, we do need, here again, we need a coach. So you can certainly go out and row on the river without a coach, but if you're making either an entry into the sport or a transition through or into high performance, then there is a very good chance that you will have a coach. And the coach as a role model is something that's very important to us. So last year we did have a talk about the importance of the coaching role, and I just wanted to remind you how important that modelling is and those behaviours are. So there's evidence to show in research that the coach's influence extends to behaviours. That would include things like cheating and anti-doping. The coach is also not just about coaching the athlete, but about developing them as a person. And in our program this time, we've got two people who are going to talk a bit about high performance coaches, and you may be surprised to find how benevolent they are in developing the rowers that they work with. So it's been a very strange year with COVID and no events. Quite sad not to be able to see our wonderful rowers performing on the water. But it has given us in world rowing a huge opportunity. We can't normally stop the clock, but this year it seems as if we have been able to. And so with the development department, there's been a huge amount of work going on in terms of World Rowing Coach Development Plan has been put into place. There's now a very detailed scheme of work with a new level 1 classic qualification, and I'm referring to it as classic because if I just refer to it as rowing, it's probably not quite so obvious, but it's the boats that we row in our Olympic disciplines. There's a level 1 for coastal, which the two coastal and classic mirror each other. There's obviously the differences in the disciplines and the boat types, but most of it is very similar. There's a new coastal race module, and there are para rowing modules as well that have all been developed in the last 6 months. And not only that, but in recent months, we've been doing virtual delivery. So we have a fantastic group of somewhere between 40 and 50 people who have trained as coach educators and continue to do so. We've also worked with some of our coaches to develop them as mentors. I'm sure most of them are already mentoring other coaches, but it's just to put a little bit more of a framework around that as well. And there's been virtual delivery of the modules that we can for a level 1 classic and level 1 coastal in some of our development nations. And the same with the coastal race module and the para modules as well. And I think that's been, I'm sure we will use virtual delivery as we go forward, but we have to do some face-to-face delivery as well. And we're looking forward to the time when restrictions enable us to go to finish these courses with the face-to-face part of what we've been doing. So I turn the attention now to the 2020 World Rowing Virtual Coach Conference Programme, which I hope you will find thought-provoking, exciting, with new information, and I know that many of you, the reason that you're here is because you're curious, and good coaches are always curious and they want to know more. So you've come along today, and this week you'll come along to try to learn more about our sport. And I couldn't have done this without, as I said, the Competitive Commission, who've completely supported and helped with ideas about the speakers. So we have quite a lot in terms of skill development and physiology. We also have got several people talking about what it takes to be a great coach, so serial winning coaches, and what are the behaviours, etc., that they show that we might want to look at in our own behaviours as coaches. But also, because of this year, we've very much brought together a lot of people from our different commissions to deliver their aspect of coach education. So Gwyn Batten will be, who's the chair of the Rowing for All Commission, which from January will become the Coastal Rowing Commission. She is going to deliver something around coastal rowing. We've got also the Para Rowing Commission have got two parts to what they're going to be talking about. One is around the new coach education modules, which I've already spoken about, and the other is a panel discussion about how to develop para rowing. We have the Women's Commission in cohort with the Development Director, Sheila Stevens, are going to talk about developing women coaches, and also an exciting project that's been going on for some time now, developing women coaches. We have Axel Muller from the Youth Commission, and he's chosen several coaches to talk about longitudinal planning and retaining under 19s in the programme. And then from the Sports Medicine Commission, we have Jürgen Steinacker, who's going to be talking about returning to training during and after COVID-19 times. I'm not saying that you've had COVID-19. And then Gianni Postiglione, who's the Director of Coaching for World Rowing, has got several parts that he's going to be delivering. One which is about looking about the development of race strategies and where that's going for world rowing and for our nations who have athletes rowing in the Olympics and World Championships, but also looking at some simple biomechanics and rigging. And I say simple, but it's trying to keep it as simple as possible, but also looking at how to monitor your athletes when you don't have a whole physiology department behind you. And then we also have from the development that they are inputting, our fantastic development coaches are going to be inputting into the monitoring session. And then we have safeguarding as well, which will be linked into our high performance coaches and the behaviours that they exhibit. So I think those go very well together. So I think it's quite diverse, it's quite exciting, and I hope that you really enjoy it. So just how the conference will work, we have a mixture of live sessions. So you've obviously tuned in already to the 27th of November for this session. Next Friday, we have another live session, which is a panel discussion. And then on Saturday the 5th, we will have live questions. So any of the video sessions, which will run every day, they will be put up onto a YouTube site. And every day, the day before, you will be sent a link to enable you to access them from 900 hours Central European time each day. And if you enjoy the session that you're watching, but you want to ask a question from one of the video sessions, then we have got, as I say, the live session on Saturday the 5th. And these are the times for those live sessions, those live session question sessions, the presentation titles, so that you can check up what title it was that you want to ask the speaker a question, and then who the speakers are. So hopefully that will help you as well to stay with us and also to ask the questions that you want later in the week. And finally, if you have questions, please can you send them to conferences@fisa.org, and we will collate your questions because it may be several people asking the same things, and we will ask them on your behalf next week. And finally, this is probably my one opportunity, so I would like to thank everybody who's helped to make this possible, and particularly the World Rowing staff, who are not great in numbers, but they're absolutely fantastic in the work that they do. And without them, we wouldn't be able to put this World Rowing Virtual Coaches Conference on. So thank you very much to them as well. Okay, and over to you, JC.
Thank you, Rosie. Let me just share my screen. Can someone just confirm that you can see the slide?
We can.
Excellent. So again, thank you very much, Rosie. Dear rowing friends, it's my great pleasure to join this introduction session day at the 2020 World Rowing Coaches Conference. I would like to thank Rosie Mayglothling, Chair of the Competitive Commission, and the members of her organization of this Coaches Conference. I must say, a very attractive and exciting program indeed, as was just presented. We have opened this particular session to delegates from member federations, so it's not only the coaches and the commission members who are attending this particular session, but also member federations delegates. So welcome to you all, delegates, coaches, team managers, and rowing friends. This is certainly unfortunate, but we miss the opportunity to see and meet each other. In this very particular context, we had no choice but to adapt ourselves to these adverse circumstances and to continue to move ahead. So thankfully, the technology allows us nowadays to keep connected and ensure that all familiar with this environment. But first and foremost, I hope that you and your loved ones are in good health. Our thoughts are with all of those who have been impacted directly by this pandemic, and also who are still feeling the effects today. Let me say also that I have a lot of who have been impacted largely by this crisis and still suffer today from the situation because of the restrictions and the quite strong measures that each country have taken to limit the spread of the virus, because of the institutions of the competitions, and equally because of the uncertainties around the evolution of the crisis. So what will next season look like? I can admit that it is certainly very uncomfortable to live with so many questions with not clear answers yet. So also to give me this opportunity to present you with an update on different subjects and information related to world rowing. To do so, I'm joined by the Executive Director, Matt Smith, who is currently in Rome. We propose a quite heavy agenda. We will try to make this presentation short enough to respect the allocated time first, but all equally to allow time for a few questions at the Q&A section. 2020 was supposed to be a fantastic year for sport, and especially for our sport rowing. We were all expecting what should have been an exceptional and exciting season, culminating with the Tokyo 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games. And we can say now, wow, what a year, but certainly not for the expected reasons and the right sense. The reality of 2020 has been totally different, and I must say terrible. The outcome is just a nightmare. In short, cancellation of the season and our world competition, postponement of the 2020 Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games. This is simply unprecedented. So this terrible crisis has had and actually continues to have severe consequences, firstly on health, obviously, and on the human dimension, but also broadly across all areas of society, and in particular the economy. The management of this crisis has been particularly difficult for everyone, and the uncertainties about the evolution of the pandemic and its consequences, again, particularly in terms of travel restriction between countries, continue to make the situation extremely complex as to make plans for the future. But we will come back on this later. First of the update will be on the FISA congresses. As you all know, we held by video conference on Friday, 16th of October, the FISA 2020 Ordinary Congress, followed on Saturday, the 17th and Sunday, the 18th, by the Extraordinary Congress. So it was the first time ever in our long history that these important and formal meetings of our organization were held virtually. Let me say that it was quite challenging, but it went well. Technology is crucial, is paramount to connect all delegates, and also when it comes to the voting. We have been working with an external and independent company, and I must say that the voting went perfectly with no technical problem at all. So on the Ordinary Congress, let me just mention briefly, we had actually 91 registered member federation, and a few less have actually participated and were connected. I will not relate in details, no need to bother you all what has been mentioned during the Congress, but just to mention that a new chair for the Para Rowing Commission was elected, Paola Guizzetti from Italy. Actually, she replaces Fejo, who has been appointed by the Council as our continental representative for Asia. FASA, the African Rowing Confederation, was recognized formally by the Congress under Article 18. So for the rest, again, it's largely about reports, and I invite you to look at the agenda papers or at the video on YouTube if you want to know more about the Ordinary Congress. Let me now move to the Extraordinary Congress. As you know, the Extraordinary Congress is held once every 4 years, usually after the Olympic Games. It's first and foremost dedicated to review statutes and rules of racing, proposed changes. Why? Simply because the world is changing, our environment is changing, and as an organization, obviously we have to adapt. We are in this continuous improvement mode, and it's important that we include this adaptation in our organization. Here is a summary of the voting results. As you can see, all proposals from the Council passed and with the FA score, I would say. And this is not by chance. This quite exceptional, or say a great outcome, is the result of our approach largely based on preparation and anticipation. It's actually the outcome of a 3-year-long process to ensure the best preparation of the Congress. It means it was about a large consultation with all stakeholders. We had a full engagement with the member federations in particular, all along this journey. Just to mention that we had 2 working groups, one dedicated to governance and statutes, the second one dedicated to look at to review the competition and the rules of racing, and they were fully dedicated, and they made a fantastic and immense work to make the proposal changes. So. Then, as to address the adverse COVID-19 context the past months, we developed in the last phase a series of presentation and equally organized video conferences with the member federations, again, to really embark all the member federation and to anticipate all the possible debates and clarify the proposal. So again, you have all these materials on our website, should you want to have a look at it. We have, let me just highlight some key major changes we had in the statutes. This is the document that was provided, and also that you can see on the website. And I will not go into very much detail, but I would like simply and briefly to highlight only some of them. Article 1, certainly quite a significant change. It's about our federation name. As you know, World Rowing was developed as our brand for quite a while now. And FISA, our historical and corporate name. As a matter of consistency, in current trend in terms of identity, it was proposed and accepted to move rowing. In FISA, we have been very proactive to reduce the gender imbalance in our sport. Participation at the level of the athletes, but not only, at every level of the organization. If we can be proud of what has been achieved, like the remarkable gender balance in the council and in the executive committee, we are not there yet. There is still room for improvement. And notably, when it comes to the representation at the Congress, the statistics are not at the level we can expect. And this also we have alerted and encouraged for change. So from now on, if a member federation wants to accredit more than one delegate, both genders must be represented. This is extremely simple. So some changes around Article 38 and 48 related to the Council and the Executive Committee. This change is mainly a clarification on the roles and responsibilities of the two bodies. It was suggested by the auditors that the FISA statutes and assignment of responsibility and accountability between the Council and the Executive need to be updated to Swiss banking and accounting law. So basically, as you can see on the screen, the Council is responsible for all sport matters, whereas the Executive Committee has oversight responsibility for the management, administration, finance, and governance. So, as explicitly mentioned actually in the auditor's report every year, the executive committee is fully responsible for the preparation of financial statements in accordance with the Swiss law. So we consulted a law firm with specific expertise on Swiss association law and significant experience with sport organization and international federation in particular. So this is the outcome of this exercise. Athletes Commission, another big change, the structure actually of the Athletes Commission. This was, it was a request from the Athletes Commission, and to have actually both appointed and elected members within the commission. So we were absolutely in line with this principle, but I must say that it was quite difficult to implement such principles in terms of practicality and notably when it comes to the election at the World Championship. But this regulation has been worked and is now in the Appendix S5. I would just add two additional important aspects regarding the chair of the Athletes Commission. Chair, actually, the members of the Athletes Commission will vote for the chair among themselves, and this recommendation will be appointment. The second point, which is very important and I'd like to highlight, is that the chair of the Athletes Commission now sits as a full member of the executive committee with voting rights. So we have an additional executive committee member. Another very important aspect, you are aware that each rower had to sign a commitment form. Now, this will be enlarged and will be applicable to all persons participating in any world rowing activity. This is dealt with the Appendix S10. So on this, let me just mention a few aspects. In addition to the respect of the code of ethics, there is now an explicit reference to safeguarding. There is also specific awareness on safety as for the rowers. And for everyone, we have now a reference to proper insurance coverage. So very important, this commitment form. That again, all of you who will be participating at world rowing activity will have to sign. On the code of ethics, that is actually covered on Appendix S11, the article clarifies the communication of sanctions and introduces the mutual recognition concept. Indeed, to avoid someone sanctioned for safeguarding matters can then move to another country and potentially put other individuals at risk. These are the main aspects that I wanted to share with you, and I'm now handing over to the executive director to present you the key changes for the rules of racing. Matt, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coaches Conference. Pleasure to be with you. I see many old friends are in the participants, but also many new people that haven't had the chance to participate in a World Rowing Coaches Conference. I'll address now a few quick points on the rules. You will find on the website this, in the Congress section, this summary of the changes to the rules. and you can, it highlights some of them that we think are a little more substantial. Next, I'll review a few and not make it too long. First is the new rule 5, number 5, where we have changed it to a bit to allow the strategic event attribution process to move forward. That is our strategic approach to awarding and attributing regattas, world rowing regattas, respecting the investment of the government authorities in our venues. There are many venues, and they want a more strategic approach to justify investment. So this is this allows us to make a more strategic approach. Next. On our Rule 13 men's and women's events, we now have a procedure to deal with gender categorization and to specifically handle change in gender, particularly from male to female, which is then covered in an appendix in a bylaw. So we are fully in line with the international sports movement and all the other sports which are dealing with this, and we are in the front line with them to have an appropriate response and process to deal with this. And we have a special expert group to advise on this. Next. And here is the first part of the appendix R1, where it is explained about the process to be approved to race and compete in a different gender. Next. So there's a new rule. The new rule 14 is on safety and health. And first of all, we re-emphasize the basic right to compete free from unhealthy influences in the sport of rowing. So it's highlighted here in the beginning of this rule. Next. And one of the most fundamental abilities and skills a rower needs to have is, of course, the ability to swim. And it went without saying for a long time, and we felt the time had come to specifically address it as a very basic and required skill. And it's now in the rules. In order to compete at events, rowers shall be able to swim at least 50 meters and keep their head above water unassisted for 3 minutes, which is explained more deeply in the rules as you look at this carefully when you come to it. Next. So we have a large number of event regulations in the appendix area, and it's important you have a look. We have called the appendices for the statutes S1 through 12, and now we have the appendices for the rules, the bylaws to the rules, and the specific event regulations, which are noted with R before the number. This is now found in the rulebook section of the website. The website is being rebuilt and will be launched in mid-December, as you'll find a new approach to our website. But it's currently in the rulebook section in the marked up version. So go back to Jean-Christophe for the next part of this presentation.
Thank you, Matt. I hope you can hear me. So let's move now to the next point regarding the Olympic strategy. I will not go back too far in the past. You all know how our 2024 Olympic strategy is built, starting from the 2017 IOC Executive Board decision that at the time confirmed FISA's proposal for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. but with a clear and loud continuous pressure on our weight category. As the outcome of the project to save the lightweight events in the program was not conclusive, we then adapted the strategy and moved to what I call from a defensive attitude to an ambitious proactive approach. So at the end of February this year, we submitted the preliminary file for the Paris 2024 program to the IOC sport department. So this proposal contained the ambitious proposal to add 3 coastal rowing events to replace the eliminated lightweight double sculls. So, and this proposal was in full accordance with the strict criteria or principle set by the IOC, which are actually first, full gender equality program. Secondly, no additional athletes quota requested. And third, that the for new discipline, you have to use existing venues. So where are we? I must say that during all this process, the discussions with the IOC have been consistently open and very constructive. We were able to introduce the discipline and to share our arguments within a more general perspective around the stakes of Agenda 2020 and the new norm. I must say that reactions were very positive toward the sport aspect of this discipline, which has actually great relevance in many ways. Attractiveness was also confirmed to us by OBS, you know, OBS being the organization that broadcast the images of the games and thus is a quite important or significant stakeholder in the system. Then the COVID-19 crisis disrupted a little bit the process, both I would say on the timing and also on the context. First, the management of the crisis at the IOC mobilized all resources, and in fact, for obvious and understandable reasons, the subject had somewhat taken a backseat. That said, despite the postponement of the Tokyo Olympics, the IOC decided to maintain and confirm actually the date of December 2020 for the executive board to try to make a decision on the Paris 2024 program in order to avoid impacting the preparation of the following Olympic cycle. So to move ahead with the full analysis of our proposal, the discussions with the stakeholders, the IOC, OBS, and the organizing committee of Paris 2024 have then accelerated and become more technical. It has moved and focused on the cost and complexity aspects. So a detailed assessment on cost and complexity has been launched to evaluate more precisely the actual feasibility for a coastal rowing event in Marseille, as Marseille being the sailing venue and the only option for coastal rowing as the surfing venue, which is, as you know, in Tahiti, was excluded as an option by the IOC. So the exercise was all about space allocation, cohabitation with sailing, accommodation, and of course, as it comes to the games, transport, security, and all these different aspects. So, this the outcome of this assessment will then be presented to the Olympic Program Commission that will meet this Monday, the November 30th. There is another aspect I would like to mention also about the current situation with Paris 2024 and this very, I would say, strong pressure on the financial aspect. It goes without saying, and it was repeated by the French president to the IOC president, that fully supportive of the Olympic Games, but at one condition, that the budget is the operational budget is respected. So this is a strong pressure, legitimate pressure, and that's why Paris 2024 has decided now to find the way to save 10% of the operational budget to keep a kind of a room of maneuver. So there is a strong pressure to save roughly 350 million. I just remind you that the overall budget of Paris 2024 is just below 4 billions. It's about 3.9 billion. So they are looking at finding 350 million euros. So just to give you the current, I would say, situation and the current context that I would probably define as being clearly unfavorable. So in that context, as you know, the FISA Congress has strongly supported the proposal made by the Council. And so, as you can see, is to have actually 15 events in Paris 2024 Olympic Games, having three coastal events, one being a mixed event. So yeah, this proposal passed the Congress with a fairly high level. And now what are the next steps? So on Monday, the Olympic Program Commission will analyze and study all the different requests from the sports, and they will develop recommendations for the IOC Executive Board that will meet the following weeks from the 7th to the 9th of December. So we are next to the end of this long journey, a long process, and the outcome will come quite soon. Just to mention that in our discussion with the IOC, and again, let me just also repeat it, that very, very positive, constructive, very open. We have a full, we have different aspect, not only about the event, but also about the quota, the number of athletes, and in that respect as well, you know that there is a strong pressure to limit the number of athletes at the Olympic Games to 10,500, including the additional sports, and therefore they are looking at cuts in some of the sport, including rowing, to fit in that criteria, in that goal. So we are also discussing the quota. And in addition to that, and before I leave the floor to Matt again, we are also discussing our the 2028 Olympic regatta venue as being another aspect for the discussion related to cost and complexity, and how far are we able to adapt to the difficult situation, and you know, you already know about Los Angeles 2028 rowing course, and I will now leave the floor to Matt to make you an update on this.
Thank you, JC. Again, please, if you have a question, type it into the Q&A section. If you go put your cursor at the bottom of your screen, you'll see Q&A, and then you can type in a question there. We'll see if we can get to them today or respond to you later on during the week. Many of you have heard this or know this, but I see a lot of new names on the attendee list, so we'll take you back a little bit in time about the Los Angeles 2028 bid. We aren't speaking about Paris 2024. It's an existing venue, Vers-sur-Marne, that has been totally renovated, and it is a fantastic new venue, but it is all ready to go, so we won't need to speak about venues in terms of Paris. Los Angeles, at the time of the bid, and there were several bidders, were required, next slide, to present a venue at the bid stage which conformed with our current rules. And for those who don't know Los Angeles, there isn't a lot of water. I happen to be from Los Angeles and made a presentation of every body of water I could find in the state of California, but they found one down at, as you can see on your bottom right there, called Lake Paris. And you can see the distances from the village in Westwood at the UCLA campus, very far away from the heart of the Olympic Games. They won the bid for 2028, and we began to get the signals from particularly even the IOC president about the distance away from the venue, from the heart of the Olympic Games. So this is a picture of Lake Paris. As you can see, there's plenty of water. It's in a kind of a desert setting. And the downsides are it's rather remote, desert area, low population density, high cost of creating a satellite village out by this venue at a university, and mainly far away from the heart of the Olympic Games, and not sure that there would be a legacy. So we know that there's an existing venue from the 1932 Olympic Games in Long Beach called the Long Beach Marine Stadium. And so we turned our attention to that to see what the current situation was in Long Beach. It looks like this. And again, created for the 1932 Olympic Games. It's a huge, fantastic population density area, and it's near to the hub of triathlon and several other sports around the Long Beach arena. It is possible to use the Olympic Village at UCLA, and with an Olympic Lane, you're going a little bit fast on me, JC. Go back one. Using the Olympic Lane, you can get within 30 minutes from the Olympic Village to Long Beach and be at the heart of the Games. There is a problem, and that is that, go ahead to the next slide, there is a bridge at 500 meters, the 2nd Street Bridge, which has abutments and goes over the course. And we have another downside is that it's tidal. It's connected to the Pacific Ocean. So there is some tide, and it depends, of course, on the time of day and the time of year, the impact of the tide. So we went out on several site visits with meter sticks and measurements to find out exactly what could we achieve. And we tried everything possible. There are a lot of considerations: security, where can we put infrastructure, venue infrastructure, et cetera. And we concluded that we are not able to raise 2,000 meters there. So the next slide is showing you the conclusion that has been accepted by all of the government authorities in Long Beach of a 7-lane, even 8-lane, 1,500 meter course, warming up past the bridge, a floating television road. And we are just waiting for some final studies to be made. We were slowed down by COVID in terms of making those studies, but this is the final proposal for us. And again, the pluses are high population density, the ability to use the main Olympic Village and not create more costs with the sub-village, very close to the heart of the Olympic Games. Thousands and thousands of spectators can watch along the shores of the Long Beach Marine Stadium, and a strong legacy plan in place with this proposal. So that is an update on LA 2028, and I'll go back to JC for the next section.
Thank you, Matt. So next session will be related to the 2021 season, but before that, let me just briefly comment on the 2020 season. And I was referring earlier on to the dramatic consequences of the 2020 international season. Whilst cancellation of our competition became necessary, we have at the time provided for some flexibility actually at the continental level, if you remember. Restriction on intercontinental traveling have been more stringent than the more flexible condition at a continental level. So excuse me, uncertainty prevailed until the end, but at the end, all the three European championships eventually took place. First, the under-23 in Duisburg, Germany, then the junior in Belgrade, Serbia, and finally the senior in Poznan, Poland. So let me first of all tell you how pleased I was to sense the enthusiasm of the athletes, to see the strong motivation of the teams in spite of additional and very strict conditions due to the pandemic countermeasures. They were really happy to participate to this international event. So all three competitions have been a major sport success. As I just said, all this has been possible thanks to the setting up of very strict protocol and of binding prevention measures. The teams and the Sports Medicine Commission have been working intensely to so as to develop with the IOC and based on the WHO recommendations, guidelines for the organization of competitions, in spite of the pandemic. And you can have access to this to the document called Return to Staging Regattas that you can find in on the website. So this was developed so as to reduce as far as possible, and I would say to a reasonable level, the risk of contamination. Let me thank them, the Sports Medicine Commission, and also the staff for their huge and difficult work, without which it would have been simply impossible to organize these competitions. So this experience of staging competition within this virus or COVID environment has enhanced our protocol. And even if this unfortunate pandemic prevails in 2021, we should be able to organize a competition. Of course, and this is the tricky point, should the travel restrictions permitted. So immediately after the 2020 event cancellations, the FISA team and the wider stakeholders were working on the 2021 season. I must say that this exercise was far from easy to discuss with all the organizing committee. I mean, it was a huge, massive work. But eventually, they came up with a packed schedule, and Matt will briefly describe where we are in that respect for 2021. And also, you will have a more detailed presentation on next Friday. But let me first just give you briefly some information about Tokyo. I will start by saying that postponing the games was certainly a very difficult decision. To a certain extent, probably more difficult than a pure or a simple cancellation. But you will agree that we all, and when I say we, athletes, coaches, delegates, and member federation, all of us, all the passionate of sport, we are fully behind this decision. That said, it starts. It's when the difficulty starts. It was not. It cannot be a simple copy and paste. And I can tell you that the consequences of such a decision of postponement are just massive in terms of work, complexity. I can tell you with all the contracts signed with the venues, the Olympic Village, all this, I mean, it's just unbelievable how complex it is. And also in terms of subsequent additional costs. So the IOC and the Japanese authorities and Tokyo Metropolitan Government, the TOCOG, so the Tokyo Organizing Committee, have worked since tremendously to address all the issues. A task force was created. All the team have been working very hard again since it was decided to postpone the games. They have been cooperating closely with the World Health Organization, with medical and scientific experts, as well as pharmaceutical companies. So I would say, including all stakeholders. Firstly, I would say that we can be positive and optimistic. Obviously, reasonably, but I would have today an optimistic message. There is a lot of support, I can tell you, from the Japanese authority, from the new Prime Minister Suga, from the Governor Koike, all are collectively determined to stage safe and secure Olympic Games Tokyo 2020. That's actually easy to say, but it's a key piece of this equation. Then there are two aspects: the cost and the pandemic situation. On the cost, it's clear that the impact of the postponement is tremendous in terms of additional expenses I've just said. So let's be clear, everything is under review, and simplification is the key word. Simplification. They will try to find any cost saving, and just to let you know that the games will not be what it would have been in 2020. It will be in terms of level of service, in terms of transport, in terms of all the different aspects, but, and this is very important, not to the detriment of the athletes and their performance. Everything will be has been reviewed, but while the athletes' environment and for their performance has been protected. But even ourselves, we have been contributed to this exercise. So this is on the first aspect, the cost. Then on the pandemic situation. So it is now clear that whatever the situation is, the games will go on. Vaccine or no vaccine, this is not a question. At this point in time, we cannot anticipate what will be the situation, and therefore they have developed actually different scenarios and built what they call a kind of a toolbox with different measures that they will adapt depending on where we are at the time. Athletes will have to travel and teams to come to Tokyo. So again, whatever the pandemic will be at the time, they will have all the measures ready to adapt to the situation. This was presented at the Coordination Commission last week. I don't have all the details and all these measures, so I will not present you with an exhaustive list and detailed list of what will be adopted. And again, it will depend on the situation, but what I can say is it will be about travel restrictions for the athletes. It's about quarantine, should the athletes being on quarantine before they arrive to Tokyo. It's about testing, and they are considering having every second day possibly COVID-19 test, so that they can immediately react should a contamination occur. It will be about a particular organization at the Olympic Village, dining area, a lot of specific COVID measures. So again, I cannot go into details, but I can tell you that it will be quite strict to really ensure a safe and secure environment for the athletes. Another aspect will be the athletes' length of stay. They are considering that the athletes would have to leave the village quite shortly after they finished their competition. So to make it short, again, I cannot give you all the final details, but I would just say that we can be confident that the conditions in Tokyo will be appropriate to stage a safe, secure, and successful games. That being said, the tricky point, if I may say, remains for us to complete the qualification process. I must say this is a very sensitive and difficult aspect. As you know, we have still around 30% of the quota to allocate, but I will leave Matt to give you where we are in that dimension. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, JC. We have created a dedicated session on Friday, the 4th of December, about covering about events. You know that, as JC said, we have 43% of qualification places still to be attributed, and this is the latest state of the qualification process, and we will give you a complete update next Friday. We have postponed the Americas event from January to a later date, which is still being discussed around with all of the stakeholders. As well, we'll review the 2021 season and give you updates on how we're going to handle it, because it will be a bumpy road. I know many of you have many questions about what's going to happen with the season, with the qualification events, etc. We are working on a decision-making timeline that looks something like this, where we will establish dates for key elements of the decisions to be made to be green before we go ahead. This will be explained next Friday when we get to that section. We will also explain and give you a report on the result of the infection prevention measures at the European events this year, and we'll give you a full report on what happened, what took place, and how we prevented infection among teams, but not within teams, of course, which was a different story, but we'll give you a full report on that and what to expect. We believe that we have learned a lot and we can deliver the events on site in 21 safely in terms of not passing infection. And the final, so a full review on next Friday. Send in your questions in advance on the conference's email, and we'll be sure to have plenty of time to deal with that. And again, we've started the virtual indoor championships tournament, and please look on the website to see how you can participate on that. And the finals will be run from the 23rd to 27th of February. So full review next Friday, the 4th of December. Don't miss out. Back to you, JC.
Thank you, Matt. So briefly, let us cover some very general matters, and I will try to make it short as we are running a little bit late. First is about governance. As you know, the credibility of sport organization has been severely damaged over the past year with too many scandals. I won't make the list, but you have all some scandals in head now. Since a couple of years, actually, governance has become one of the most sensitive topics, and for the obvious reasons just mentioned because of this scandal. So ASOIF, the Association of the Summer Olympic International Federation, has developed a tool to help international federation to improve their governance. It's about a self-assessment questionnaire that is then moderated by an independent company, and to make this final evaluation. So just to mention that last June, we have been provided with the finding of the third review, and we have, as you can see on the screen, in terms of governance, we have been progressing over the year, and we continue to progress. Obviously, it's a very important matter. It's about this. Again, at stake is the credibility of the sport organization, and I can tell you that we are investing so that we can continue to improve in that domain. I'm going a little bit faster than expected. On anti-doping, again, very briefly, you know about our long history of FISA history in that dimension, and I must say that FISA was well recognized in the fight against doping. I just want to mention that the landscape has tremendously changed in the past decade. Since the creation of WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, the first code in 2005. So lots have been done in that area, and at the same time, we have also discovered many scandals in the world of sport. So I just want to highlight and to make you aware that a new code will be in force from January 1st. It's another evolution, and as you know, the World Anti-Doping Code is the core document that harmonizes anti-doping policies, rules, and regulation within sport organization and also among public authorities. So just to mention also, to give you a little bit of the complexity, the code is one document, but as you can see on the screen, there are also standards, international standards, and there are 6 of them. 2 will be added on the 1st of January, so it makes 8 at the end. And all this anti-doping regulation is quite now complex. It's about 640 pages. So just to give you as an example, the complexity around this domain, and what I would like to say is World Rowing is also adapting to this new environment. We are investing. It costs, obviously, it costs resources. We are working on our organization. And just to let you know that we were audited at the end of 2018. In 2019, we have implemented actions to solve some of the administrative aspects that we were alerted on. And I must say, I can tell you that FISA or World Rowing is fully compliant with the code. I would like now to ask Matt to give you maybe a brief update on the Russian situation.
Yes, I won't explain in a lot of detail, but you know that the Russian anti-doping agency is under threat of non-compliance, and we are awaiting the verdict of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. It affects, next slide please, it affects several things, going back to the McLaren report and the Moscow lab data that was manipulated. Next is consequences that will come out of this decision if RUSADA is determined non-compliant. There will be a 4-year period of sanctions. Next. For example, Russia may not host in this 4-year period or bid for major events, including Senior World Championships or Olympic Games. Russia's flag may not be flown at a major event. And Russian athletes may only participate if they are clearly not implicated at all in this period of the investigation. So next is we're awaiting the verdict. It was heard a week or two ago at the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and the consequences for Russia are massive. So we just wanted to keep you informed that a verdict is expected by the end of the year. Okay, back to you, Jason.
Thank you, Matt. A very brief aspect on finance. I don't want to bother you very much, but you can understand about the terrible economic fallout of this crisis. And even if states strongly acted as a buffer when they massively intervened in order to prevent a catastrophic outcome during lockdown periods, some sectors have suffered cruelly. Sport is strongly affected, but to what extent in the long term is still difficult to assess, since business models vary significantly between sports. So at World Rowing, our approach has been extremely conservative, and we have always managed our finances rather prudently. We have, as you know, a 4 million reserve fund, which today is proving its value for the pursuit of our activities. However, and I would just like to mention that the uncertainties about the future compel us to be even more vigilant and careful how to adopt and to adopt actually to adopt tighter policies. So uncertainties around the Olympic revenue, as long as the games have not been successful, we don't know about the Olympic revenue, which are, by the way, the major source of incomes for World Rowing. Uncertainty equally on the other incomes, like the TV rights. As you know, there is a lot of pressure for all the stakeholders. So we are still under uncertainty in that aspect, and also uncertainty around our portfolio, as we may face a loss there. Also, it is mainly managed with bonds. So even though we did receive the governmental help, as well as a loan from the IOC in anticipation of the Olympic revenues, we must, this was a decision from the executive committee to limit our expenses to essential expenses, at least for the moment, until the end of 2021, when we know more about the Olympic revenue. And again, we can be confident about the Olympic Games, but we have also, our duty is to be vigilant, to be prudent, and that's why we have adopted this this conservative approach. This is what I wanted to express on this matter. And now back to Matt for the final point on general matters.
Yes, thank you, JC. We just want to make sure everyone's aware that we are making a lot of progress in safeguarding to help ensure our sport's safe for participants. Next slide. And on the screen, you can see the number of actions that are being carried out as we speak to help protect the safety of all participants. So there will be webinars available in the new year for member federations, athletes, coaches, etc., to get updated and to hear more about it and model policies for member federations and clubs. So watch the safeguarding area of the website to see the progress on that. Back to you, JC.
Now, we have now reached the Q&A session. I'm sorry we are a little bit late. I don't know, Rosie, do we open for Q&A for a Q&A session for a couple of minutes? Are there questions?
Well, there's none at the moment in the Q&A. So you've obviously made it very clear for everybody.
Okay, so last chance for you to have put on the Q&A a question. If not, I mean, while you are doing so, I will just conclude this session by saying again that we are living in a very difficult period of time. That said, we are all focused and determined to ensure the best future for the sport, for the athletes. We are facing this crisis, and we will all obviously we are all motivated to make things happen for next year. We will adapt to the context. We will do our best so that we can deliver to the athletes good event, international event. They deserve it, and hopefully they can fulfill their Olympic dream. So this is what we wanted to share with you. If there is no question, I would like to again to thank you for joining for this session. I'm looking forward to seeing you in 2021, hopefully in person. And for now, I wish you to stay healthy and take care. Thank you.
So thank you very much, JC and Matt. And if just to remind people, if they've got any questions, please send them into the conferences@fisa.org, and we will pass them on to be answered. Okay, it's now my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this conference. His name is Professor Stephen Seiler, and Stephen has been a long-time physiologist. He's been in Norway for 25 years. And I recently gave a seminar about masters rowing, and I have to say I used extensively your research, Stephen, particularly around the polarization of training, because if you're from my era, unless you were actually bashing it away on a boat, then you weren't really training hard enough. So he's got a fantastic resume, which we will put up onto the website for you to see. But I think one of the biggest things for me is his innovative ways of dealing with research. So he has a whole range of elite sports teams that he works with, but also he invites elite athletes to provide him with data. And he's probably one of the people that's done the most in terms of researching individual training programs to come up with some of his theories, which actually have been adopted now by many sports. He's known to us, he's spoken to us before, he's well known to Norwegian rowing as well, and to the Norwegian Olympic Committee, who for a very small organisation produce some fantastic athletes with the help of people like Stephen. So Stephen, thank you very much, and welcome to this virtual coaches conference.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm no longer a rower day to day, but 10 of the best years of my life in terms of sports were as a rower. And I can remember my first time on the water. I can remember my first coach. So I have great respect for the sport, and it's coaches, it's athletes, and yeah, it's near and dear to my heart. So let me try to share my screen. Hopefully this goes well, and I can get a little confirmation that you can both hear me and see the screen.
We do.
Okay. So I've been given this title, and I could talk about some of the details of training, and I will actually be doing that for a US rowing event in about 10 days. But I'm going to instead, you're going to hear great experts on rowing and on various aspects of training down this path you're going in this conference or this seminar. So I'm going to kind of lift up into the helicopter and look at things from a little bit broader perspective. And I hope that's okay for you. As a sports scientist, we look at sports from one of two directions. We're either using science to improve sports performance, like through Olympic federations and the staffs around those, or we are interested in some aspect of human biology, human psychology, and we're using sport as an arena or a lens to look at that through. In this case, I'm going to stick to this side of it, where I'm interested in using the scientific process to improve training, improve sports performance. And I want to ask you a little question, and it's a thought question. You're not going to raise your hand or anything, but I want to ask, what single technological innovation would you say has had the most profound effect on sport and the sports training process? If we go, I'll let you go even 100 years back in time. So anywhere from yesterday to 100 years back, what's the most important innovation that has really impacted how we do things? Think about that. Well, my vote is for this, the stopwatch. Now, this is the first one. It was developed by this guy, not particularly athletic looking dude, I have to say, and he really didn't develop the stopwatch for sports. He wanted to do it to look at astronomy issues, but beautiful piece of engineering, of handwork, and it was 1/60th of a second accurate, which was a quantum leap. But just this ability to really measure time in these small increments started us down a path towards this incremental developmental process in sport that we still deal with today. If you go, Omega started making stopwatches in the 32 Olympics. They delivered 30 stopwatches to the Olympics to help them cover the 14 sports and 117 events. By 2016, Omega sent 480 people plus 450 tons of equipment for the purpose of measuring time at the Olympics. So obviously, this is pretty important. And even in rowing, which is a kind of a long, theoretically kind of a slow event compared to many, often it comes down to less than 1/100th of a second. Now, the reason I think that's important is just because of how it's impacted our mindset in terms of how we think about innovation, what is important, how do we develop performance when 1/100th of a second can be decisive. Now, let's talk about this guy. This is Robert Garrett, and I think he symbolizes kind of part of the history of where we've come from in sport and high performance. Robert, he was a track and field athlete at Princeton University in 1896. He came from a fairly wealthy family. The entire Olympic team of the United States in 1896 was essentially from Princeton. I think it was 14 people, and they paid their own way to the Olympics. So they obviously were fairly well-to-do or had resources. Now, Robert was a shot putter, but he'd heard about the discus. He'd seen it on Greek statues or Greek art. He even had someone try to produce a discus based on drawings. Unfortunately, the size proportions were all wrong, so the discus they built weighed about 30 pounds. It was absolutely impossible to throw. So he arrived at the Athens Olympics in 1896, having never seen nor touched a discus, but he went ahead and entered the competition. And the first two throws, the discus wobbled through the air like a wounded duck. And everybody laughed, including the Greeks, who had, of course, invented this event, and it felt like they had absolute dominance in it. But on his third throw, he managed to make that darn thing spin reasonably correctly, and it barely went beyond the best throw of the Greeks and the other competitors. So he won the gold medal on the third throw of his life as a discus thrower. He also managed to take medals in the high jump, the long jump, and the shot put. So that kind of tells you where the Olympics were in 1896 and where sports and high performance sport was in 1896. By the way, he was 6'2" and 180 pounds. He was the gold medalist shot putter. Now, 1896, rowing was on the agenda, but it didn't happen because of bad weather. So we had to go to 1900 for the first Olympic rowing events. This is Brandt and Klein. They won the gold medal in the coxed pair. They also took the bronze as part of the 8 for the Netherlands. And what's interesting here is that we don't know who this is, because the actual coxswain that they had in the semifinal, Hermanus Brockman, they kicked him out of the boat because he turned out he weighed 60 kilos, and they realized that a lot of the other boats, the Frenchmen, were just putting little bitty young kids in the boat as cocks. So they just found this kid on the street. He weighed 33 kilos, and they ended up winning the gold just barely. So this probably was the winning combination of getting rid of their heavy cocks and putting in this guy. So that's where rowing was in 1900. Now, let's fast forward to 1952, Helsinki Olympics. And I would argue that the Helsinki Olympics was the beginning of modern high-performance sport as we know it today. This was post-World War II. The Soviet Union came into the Olympics for the first time, and we see the beginning of sport as a proxy for what you might say the fitness of nations, or the vigor of a nation and its political system. So now maybe the hallmark event that kind of depicted or typified that Cold War beginning was the gold medal final in the 3,000 meter steeplechase, where two of the competitors were Vladimir Kazantsev and Horace Aschenfelter. Kazantsev was part of the KGB, and Aschenfelter he worked for the FBI. I'm not making this up, folks. And Kazantsev had the world record, as I recall, but he hit his foot wrong. He kind of stumbled and he hurt his ankle. And Aschenfelter made a remarkable comeback and ends up winning the gold in this 3,000 meter final. And off we go in this kind of a race in terms of sports performance, of training technologies, and so forth, as this proxy for geopolitical fitness, you might say. So stopwatch gives us hard, cold numbers. The Cold War actually results in a climate where sport is seen as an important political tool. And if we add a third component, I would say that besides the stopwatch, the other most important technological development that's put us where we are today was the television, because televised sports and eventually the money that was generated through television created this atmosphere we have today. And today, I can, on any given day, any given hour, I would say, find sports on television at a high level. I can watch people get their heads smashed in seconds. I can watch people ski into the forest and come back in 2 hours. I can watch fast TV or slow TV. It can be my choice, but I can watch sport in all its magnificent variety every day. And so this is the environment that rowing competes in, that all sports compete in, for the attention of TV viewers. Now, if we look at sports that aren't terribly or influenced by technology, it's some, relatively mono, you might say, variant sports, like the 800 meter. This is what we're seeing. This is the typical pattern of development. This is men, this is women. For one thing, obviously, one of the reasons, females were not even allowed to compete in the Olympics in many events for decades. And so when they began to compete, they caught up rapidly. This was a socialization issue, an exposure issue, not so much some physiology or that they were training differently than men or better. And then eventually we get to a point, I would say in the last 40 years, 30 to 40 years, there has been very little development in the best performance times in these sports where there is not any type of significant technology component. And here you see that the increase or the betterment in performance from 1980 to 2020 in the 800 meter for men is about 1%. And for women, there has been no improvement because this woman, Krachlikova, still has the world record from 1983. And I'll let you be the judge in terms of the fact that this woman is much more muscular than this man and his world record. Of course, this is part of these issues that we talk about in terms of doping and things that have changed there. Now, another event, this is one where you see over a period of almost 40 years, the gold medal standard has not changed in this event. And we just happen to have a Norwegian that is brushing on, towards this world record, very close, and that makes it exciting. But it says something also about how little these sports or these disciplines have actually developed in 4 decades. This is rowing, Oxford-Cambridge boat race. It's one of the few events we have this much data on, 150 years worth of data. And you see, I made this quite a few years back and it looks pretty linear, but I would argue that if you extended this out over the last years and you looked more closely at this data from about, the 90s on, there actually has been very little additional performance improvement. So in some ways I could be accused of forcing a linear regression onto data that probably is already showing a flattening. And the same for the single. The time frame is not quite as long, but you see less variation. That's mostly just due to course selection and so forth. But in the last decades, there, you don't see the same linear decrease in time. So the improvements are getting harder and harder to come by. This is maybe the first book on training, 1866 by Archibald McLaren. It was about rowing, training theory and practice. What was you might say state-of-the-art training for rowing 150 years ago? Well, you got up at 7 o'clock and you got out of bed and you immediately ran 100 to 200 yards as fast as possible to wake yourself up. And then, in the afternoon, you went down to the river and you rowed out to the starting post and back, and you called it a day. And so if you were very liberal with your time estimations, you could maybe say that they trained for about an hour and 15 minutes on a good day. And they maybe did that 3 times a week. And that was, you might say, best practice at the time. So that's a little bit about where we've come from in terms of performance and this history. And then here we are now today, and one of the words that we constantly are confronted with in research, in all aspects of our life is innovation. We have to be innovative, and there's different definitions and working terms for what is innovation, and you see some of them here. And I've worked in university leadership, and anywhere you go, this word is impossible to avoid, and you have to have a relationship to it, and you can like it or you can hate it, but it is part of the environment that we live in. Now, innovation has obviously also been part of sports. And so you might ask, well, where has the innovation come from? And I would say that almost always innovation has come from the athletes or the athletes plus their coaches, not geeks like me. It has come from the doers, and sometimes by accident, sometimes, by serendipity, but sports like swimming, like the ski jumping, like the high jump, all of these where we've seen these radical changes in technique, those techniques were discovered by the athlete in their daily training process. And ultimately, they were the ones who said, this makes a difference. This makes me either Sitius, Altius, or Fortius, in a sense. This matters. The only really clear example I have of where a science geek like me actually presented a technology development that changed the sport was in speed skating, because the hinged skate was actually patented 100 years before it was developed. It just wasn't feasible in terms of materials and construction until around the 90s. And then it was a scientist, both an advisor and a young PhD student, that actually convinced some athletes to try a hinge skate. And ultimately they saw that it did make a difference, and it swept the sport. And now, of course, it is the standard for speed skating. Now, we have something similar in rowing. The sliding rigger was patented in 1876. It works. It makes rowers faster. There's clear reasons why, and even, you know, then they understood how it impacted. It decreased check on the boat. It influenced the run of the boat, and of course, it was outlawed. And the justification for that probably is not valid, but it's just the way it is. But that innovation, again, Volker Nolte, he rowed to demonstrate that it worked. Now, have I been innovative? Well, you know, it was kind for the introduction regarding all this polarized training and 80-20 and things like that. But to be honest, again, I didn't make this up. I saw it. I observed it in athletes, and you know, their process, their trial and error over probably 100 years had resulted in this. And I saw it in rowing athletes, particularly initially. So you could almost say that if you're saying that I've impacted training, well, it's kind of been circular, because I've seen it within training environments. I've tried to describe it. And so maybe it's just kind of a self-strengthening process. But it wasn't. It was the athletes that did the experimentation initially. So sports technology innovation, we're in this era of massive technology development, and we are confronted with a challenge, because we want to make sure that if we're going to incorporate a new technology into our coaching, into our workflow around the development of our athletes, then we need to be convinced that that new technology solves a problem, not just creates more problems or creates more time suck in our daily routines. So this new technology that you're exposed to, that someone tries to sell you, the question you got to ask is, does this new technology solve this specific problem for these athletes better than what we've done before? And when you look at these things together, what we see is we have a sports development curve where the actual performance is flattening out, but we have a technology development curve where we see explosive growth in new technologies. And there's a kind of a hype gap between the actual effect on performance or on the training process and the selling that we are observing. And so we have to be able to filter this. And this is true in a lot of situations. And this is a kind of a classic curve of the overhyping of technologies. Initially, there's this peak of expectations when a new technology comes onto the market or becomes available. And then we see that, well, it doesn't actually live up to all the hype. There's a trough of disillusionment. And then maybe, if we're lucky, there comes up to some steady state where we say, yeah, under certain conditions, this new technology does solve certain problems. And so this is a very typical hype curve. Now, who's this guy? Well, his name is Swigert. This is from Apollo 13. This is a famous failure, you might say. Apollo 13, where we know what was actually said was, Houston, we've had a problem, although they often say that it was, Houston, we have a problem. But Swigert, this is what is said. And as you may know from the story, there was an explosion of oxygen tank, and there was an amazing process around keeping these guys alive and getting them back to Earth. They were going to land on the moon. That got scrapped. But what I want you to notice, this guy's a mechanical engineer, well-trained, all the modern technology that he's wearing and everything around him. But what ended up helping to save these guys was that little watch on his hand, because he used the second hand on it to calculate or time some booster rocket burns to correct the pathway of the module they were in so that they could get back to Earth. And they had to time that pretty darn correctly and accurately. So that was the technology he ultimately resorted to. And often that's the situation we see in sports training, is we go back to the simple tools because they often work. So I want to talk about these. These are some technological development directions that are impacting sports science, and they're impacting training in different ways. There are 5 of them. 4 of them I'm going to kind of group together and then add the 5th one at the end. So we're going to look at home and field physiological measurements, embedded sensors, real-time movement analysis, big data, and then we're going to look at some kind of biology at the end. But one clear issue has been that people like me, we have spent a good deal of our career in laboratories. We bring athletes into our little world, our laboratory. This is a laboratory from over 100 years ago, but the basic goal was the same: to measure work accurately on some kind of an ergometer, like a bicycle ergometer or a rowing machine or a treadmill, and then measure the physiological responses, oxygen consumption, blood lactate, heart rate, and so forth. And at this time, all of those measurements were impossible to do anywhere but in a laboratory. This is the first, you might say, heart rate monitor on the left. It wasn't exactly mobile. It weighed a couple of 100 kilograms, and you had to use this Einthoven triangle methodology to get a heart rate measurement. And early days, it is said that an apparatus almost like this was placed on the infield of the track where Rudolf Harbig was training, in order for them to measure his heart rate. And interval training was kind of systematized. I wouldn't say that Harbig and Waldemar Gerschler invented interval training, but they connected it to cardiovascular function. And so they certainly popularized it. And Harbig's world record in the 800 stood from 1940 to 1955. So it was a long-standing record. Now, today, physiology has moved into the field. We can measure power. We can measure heart rate, blood lactate. We can even measure oxygen consumption in the field. We can get at perceptual measurements. And all of this allows us to try to assess this relationship between the external work the athlete is doing and the internal cost, and how that is changing both in workouts and across time. So this is our kind of our trinity of measurements that help us to follow and monitor what is happening with the athlete over time. But in very much of this, we no longer need the laboratory. I would say none of it we're dependent on a strict laboratory environment to do anymore. So this is a very interesting development. This is my little pain cave at home. This is it's cycling that I do. I've had 2 surgeries on my shoulder, so I don't row anymore. But I am able to measure power and heart rate. And if I want to, I can bring home a blood lactate measurement. I can measure EMG. I can do lots of things in the comfort of my loft in my house, as can hundreds of thousands of athletes. And this is an important development for how we coach and how we monitor the training process. Now, another big development is the sensors. We have telemetry sensors for tracking movement, acceleration, velocity, placement. We can put a sensor on almost anything, essentially, and try to assess what is happening and help to train technique and so forth. When I started rowing late as a PhD student. I decided I needed to, learn how to row technically well. And I studied and I read and I learned about the check in the boat and the force velocity curve and so forth. So I got busy with some innovation and I developed my own boat velocity fluctuation sensor. Now, you probably haven't heard of this. Unfortunately, it didn't get very far in terms of marketing. But what I did is I found one of these, a snorkel, and I cut off a piece of it. And then I found this, which is the best friend of any sports scientist, and that's duct tape. And I attached this to the stern of the boat in just such a way so that I had an intake, and I created, if you would, a speed fountain that allowed me to see, to visualize the check of the boat. If the flow of that fountain of water didn't stop, then I felt like I was doing a better job with my rowing technique. So this was my sensor at the time. Now, it turns out that better solutions came along. I have to admit that. But I was, I felt like I was on track to something there for a while. Today, we have different solutions. And we have a tremendous amount of data that can be extracted from every stroke of every rower in the boat. From the Nelson Kellerman speed coach of the 70s to today, where they offer an app that allows us to look at, all these different coefficients and components of the stroke. You look on the left, this is just power or force versus time. This is an experienced crew. This is a less experienced crew. This idea of synchronization. A lot of these things we can visualize this from the coaching launch. Is it helping? Another is real-time video, real-time motion analysis. When I was a high school kid, what kind of helped me to decide I wanted to get into sports science was hearing about this guy, Gideon Ariel, who was a biomechanist. He worked with analyzing the discus and the shot put and the hours and hours they used to quantify one throw or one movement was amazing. Today, you as coaches have access to, everybody has their video system on their phone, and they can connect that with an iPad or whatever and do meaningful analysis and, more importantly, real-time visualization to show the athlete what they're doing, what, their body positions, their technical changes. And I remember as an athlete in rowing, my coach, Matt Diefenbach, would come to the launch with his new video camera and show us on the tiny little screen what we were looking like, how our back position and so forth. And even then, that seemed like a really powerful tool to get that immediate or relatively immediate feedback. And this is just accelerated over time. So this is an important development, but it has to be used appropriately. And now this is from Olympiatoppen in Oslo, the cross-country skiing coach he's got his athlete on a huge treadmill, and this creates this environment where the coach can look at the technique of the athlete under a situation that would normally be very difficult because the athlete's just flying by, just like in a boat. And here the athlete can see themselves, the coach can see them. They can actually put video cameras where the athlete can see themselves from behind, from the side. And so these kinds of environments for feedback, technical feedback that can be connected to physiology we think they're pretty powerful. So that's another development. And then, of course, we have this data development. We have tremendous access to data. In my career as a sports scientist, in the early days, if I go back to even the 90s, a study where you had, say, 8 athletes, that was acceptable. That was a reasonably sized study because this kind of data was just so hard to come by. You had to go into the lab to get it. It was difficult. Now, we have data from thousands of athletes, millions of athletes coming into digital tools every day. For example, Training Peaks, I've given talks for Training Peaks a couple of times. Over 10 million training sessions are stored on the Training Peaks platform every month. That was in 2018 when they said the number was 10 million. So I suspect it's a lot more now. So there is a tremendous amount of data available on the training process if we are able to use it in a way that's useful. Here's an example. All of us know about the Concept 2 and the Concept 2 database. You can, the world rankings. If you've rowed, you've at some point probably submitted a time to the database. Well, with a friend from the UK, we developed an app to what he calls scrape all of that data and put it into a tool where we could do some analysis very quickly. And so, for example, if I wanted to know, well, what's the age-related change in power from rowing either a 5,000 or a 2,000, I can just plug in that data and presto majesto, I have data that would have taken months or years to aggregate and compile just a decade or two ago. And I can do this in seconds. And so this is, big data, close to big data, over 1 million performances that are even in this database. And there are many others like them that are now being exploited and used to understand various things like gender differences or aging developments or things like that. And we know we have training diaries. Now, a diary, when I grew up, a diary was something you wrote in. You wrote your thoughts. You wrote sentences or phrases. So a diary of training. Here it says, after dinner, I just didn't feel like going out on the bike, so I didn't. Okay, that's a qualitative feedback. And then we get a little bit more quantitative with log books that developed. I remember the Runner's World training diaries, and which became, devised to help us measure things more numerically, counting kilometers. And that, of course, can impact training. It starts us down a path towards training for our logbook sometimes. But today we have these digital tools, and in order to appeal to our sense of determinism and saying that, we know what's going to happen, we like to have numbers, then there have been developed these various algorithms and metrics and stress scores and load scores and that haven't necessarily been validated, and they certainly don't necessarily act the same from individual to individual, but they have a very powerful appeal because they give us a sense as coaches of control. And unfortunately, that may not be deserved, but that's often the appeal of these metrics. So we have to be very careful how we interpret them and how much faith we have in the difference between 200 and 190 from one of these metrics or something like that. And we have to remember that there have been a lot of athletes that have reached extremely high levels of performance and the gold medal podium position, having never used any of these technologies. But what it all comes down to, all of these technologies that are available to us, at least in a daily coaching situation, what you want them to help you achieve is an answer to this question. And it's still the same question that it was 20 years ago when I was rowing. How do we feel? How do you feel? Ready to row? Ready to go hard? Need another day? Where are you in your, your physical and mental status relative to the task at hand? Are you responding to the training? How is the training that I am prescribing? How are you absorbing it? These are the questions we ask from day to day. And those questions are not changing with our technologies. So these home and field-based measurements, all the sensors that we have access to, the real-time analysis and videos and the big data, all of them are different manifestations of our need for feedback. We want to facilitate that discussion between coach and athlete, between you and your athlete or your athletes, around those core questions of how is this process going? Where are you in your journey towards the best possible 240 strokes you can take in that boat, in that race that matters most to you? Now, in the Olympiatoppen framework, there are three kind of sub goals towards the big goal, which is to win gold medals. And one is to be excellent in a daily training quality. Another is, to facilitate great relationships in the performance team, because that is important on that day-to-day level. And then, of course, to execute on game day, on when you are at the line, to actually execute at the best of your ability. So a lot of the work that I'm involved in and at the organization that I have worked with, that's where their focus is that grassroots process. It's the daily training process that ultimately achieves success. And so if I'm going to recommend a new technology to you as a coach or to your athletes, then I want to feel confident that that new technology is going to inform, is going to add something useful to that communication between athlete and coach, because that's the absolute heart of the process. You are at the heart. You're at the, as we call it, the coal face every day. And that's where development happens, not in a laboratory and not from the sports scientist. My job when I worked with these speed skaters and this coach, these Dutch speed skaters, it was not to infuse on them my Texas talent in speed skating, because that didn't exist. It was about informing this process, informing the training process, informing communication on that daily grind, that daily adjustment process towards the goal. So great training sessions. I love this from Siren Sundby and Arna Risa from Olympiatoppen. So I've taken it from them to show you this example. She said that this idea of great training happens when the external and the internal feedback aligns. And I love it. I felt it as an athlete. I'm sure it resonates with you as a coach. The coach said it. I felt it. And the video camera confirmed it. That is alignment. And that is those days when progress is made, when we feel that connection between internal, external feedback. But that doesn't happen every day. So we have access to a lot of technologies that might potentially improve the quality of daily training. We have to be open. I, as a scientist, I've been in this game a long time. I have my healthy skepticism to new things at my age, but I try to be open to the possibility that a new technology can give me something new that can help me to help other coaches, other athletes. So this is the test. This is the litmus test that we need to be, be open, but also don't be easily drawn into every new thing that comes down the pike, as we say. And remember, guys, people like me, we have a tendency to think that more variables are just more fun. And so we can often be the source of confusion. And you have to, if we are, then you're going to get rid of us. I get that. But you have to filter, and we have to filter our information, because for athletes and coaches, the bottom line in a busy workflow is that more is, or less is more, in the sense that I want to give my coach or athlete actionable information, not confusion. So this is, again, in these environments, these coach athlete high performance environments where the scientific support comes in, this is the truth test: is can I as a sports scientist condense it down to something useful, the one thing that helps them that day or that week. And we have to remember that with all this feedback, with all this technology, we don't want to paralyze our athlete or render them unable to not have their feedback, because when the competition begins, the rules of the game often will say that you're not going to have that watt measurement, you're not going to have that heart rate, you're not going to have that feedback. You have to depend on what you feel, your pacing, your effort, your ability to control your own situation. All of that has to be retained in the training. You can't become technology dependent. And finally, I want to throw out a little bit on this issue, and that is that there is a lot of innovation constantly around our biology. My own PhD was on antioxidants. I studied heart performance. I killed a lot of rats. I'm not particularly proud of it, but they, it was in the name of science that I was trying to understand something about so-called free radicals, and we talk about those in performance. So we talk about these nutritional technologies and other kinds of technologies in terms of accelerating recovery or enhancing the training stimulus. And I want to remind you of this hierarchy, because unfortunately, or what motivated me to make this, is that often the high-tech stuff is what makes the most noise. It's what gets advertised. But the things that matter most for your athletes, which are getting out there every day, doing the work, the basic training process, that's not very sexy because you can't make money off of it. And so we have to keep that in mind. And as coaches, remember where, how the hierarchy looks, what matters most, and build that platform, build that pyramid, step for step, and make sure that it doesn't get inverted because of people trying to sell us things. And, in a performance situation, we know that our athletes get hot, so there's heat stress. We use carbohydrates, so there's glycogen depletion. There's oxidative stress, so-called reactive oxygen species. We have inflammatory processes. So all of this are physiological mechanisms that are negative in the sense that they cause stress, they cause breakdown temporarily for the body. And so there's been this idea that if we stop them, if we prevent them, if we reduce them, then performance gets better, the training process is improved. And there's been a lot of research around taking vitamin C, taking antioxidants, around carbo loading, around using anti-inflammatories, around ice baths. And every single one of these, we see that when it comes to the actual training stimulus, the signal for adaptation, they actually do more harm than good, because it turns out our biology, our evolutionary biology has taken millions of years, and these molecules, these signals that all have negative effects, are also signals for adaptation. So when they are dampened, the adaptation is also blunted. And this has been an interesting phenomenon over the last 20 years. So we have to be careful of trying to, what should we say, shortcut Mother Nature when it comes to this. There are situations where it can be appropriate to use some of these, like anti-inflammatories, during a competitive situation where you want to just help them get through the competition. Rugby players or so forth with lots of damage, you may want to use anti-inflammatories, but it's not because it's going to improve the adaptation. It's more of a survival or dealing with the damage during the event. So our biology is complex, and when we try to shortcut it with profit-driven biotech, often that has been led to highly oversimplified failures. So keep that in mind. Be vigilant and be aware when you and try to consult on these nutritional strategies with good people. So that is what I wanted to share with you. And I wish you great success in your coaching, that we come through 2020 healthy and with renewed energy towards normalization. And I wish you many great races and perfect strokes down the road. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you so much. That was really interesting and stimulating, as ever. And we have got some questions. So if you're okay, I'll ask you a couple of questions that have come up.
Sure.
So the first one is there a measurement system in rowing which is the most recommended? It says by the Federation, but I guess by you maybe.
Well, what do you mean by measurement system? in terms of the training process or boat velocities and things like that? I guess there's two possibilities there.
I don't know the answer to that. So I don't know if it's Jacek, if you wanted to elaborate a bit more, what type of measurement system you're talking about. So is it on the boat, or is it on the, what is it you want to be measuring? Okay, so maybe we leave that while he puts something else up, because there's another question here as well.
Okay.
So how negative is the effect of allowing athletes to drift into zone 2? And would it be better for them to train well within zone 1 to make sure? This is for rowers who usually carry out 8 to 12 hours of low intensity training per week.
Right.
And I think you'd be talking probably about five different.
Yeah, if you're
levels.
talking about a 5-zone model, then zone 2. Yeah, I think in rowing, remember, rowing is a 6-minute competition event. And so, if we compare it with cycling, where they've got these 6-hour races and their training volumes, they're going to do a lot of zone 1. I would think that in rowing, there's probably more, I could argue more for that you will spend a bit more time closer to that threshold in that so-called zone 2, because the sessions are shorter. I don't see rowers doing 4-hour rows very often, and I don't see the need either in terms of that being additional stimuli compared to, say, a 90-minute or 120-minute long session. So in that sense, remember that the low intensity component is always going to be this interaction between the intensity and the duration. So if your long rows are shorter, coming down, then you can ease the intensity up a little, but just make sure that it doesn't transition into, this where they're pushing hard, because that's the risk, that they drift into zone 3. They're in that threshold area, and then the cost, everything just kind of amplifies disproportionately once you get into that threshold region. So if that happens too often, then you're starting to get into a problem. Okay,
thank you. And just our friend Volkan Nolte, who I'm sure you know, he just says, very interesting presentation. Well done, Stephen, and thanks.
Oh, well, he's part of the presentation.
Okay, so we've got a bit more clarification now. So on the first question I asked you, which was about the measurement system, and he says, I mean the measurement of the athlete performance. Is there some of the best hardware or software for it? So it's
a great question, and I don't think there is a single best methodology, and I would encourage coaches to embrace the Trinity. And by that I mean that I showed you that idea that in rowing, we can measure power, we can measure boat speed, and that's some external information that's important under controlled conditions. We can measure heart rate, we can measure blood lactate reasonably easy in the field, and we can measure just perceptual feedback. In other words, how is this feeling? Where are you in terms of your effort? And I think we need to use all three. So I would basically argue to you that any system that tries to tell you, hey, you just need power, or you just need our heart rate variability, or you just need our lactate measurements, run from them, because that it won't work. You need that triangulation, because there are weaknesses and strengths with each of these types of measurements. And so you as a coach, you know, just like a well-functioning government, you need checks and balances. You need to talk to your athlete. You need to ask, how did this feel? You need to look at the heart rate, but don't be driven by it. You know, be able to look at it in a context. So that's my argument, is the best system is the system that you develop, that triangulates, that helps you to feel like you have a kind of an internal second opinion when you're looking at this process, this training process, and how your athlete is responding and absorbing the training. I hope that was a reasonable answer.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Jamie Kirkwood is how, with regards to supplements, for an example, if someone has low vitamin D levels from a blood test, would vitamin D pills still be advisable, or does this prevent the body's adaptation? He's just picking out an example, but it could go on.
Yeah, no, if there is a nutritional deficiency that is clearly measured, and then yes, let's fix that. You know, my daughter has had low iron, but we fixed it, and her hemoglobin has gone up from 11.8 to 14. Fantastic. We've helped correct that problem. So don't get me wrong. If there are deficiency issues, then they impact performance and they need to be dealt with. But what I'm discussing more have been these ideas that you know, let's prevent glycogen depletion by just constantly using glucose or a drink. Let's take vitamin C to prevent free radical oxidation. Let's use ice or anti-inflammatories. You know, we're taking paracetamol before the workout. Well, it turns out it sounds good, but it turns out that it tends to compromise that molecular signal, because nature has told the organism or given the organism mechanisms where that negative molecule is a signal for an adaptation that helps to prevent its production in the future through more mitochondria or whatever. So those are two different issues. You know, there are some deficiency issues, keeping tabs on them through checkups and then correcting them with appropriate supplements. That's important, and that's fair game, and that's different than what I'm talking about here.
Okay, so thank you. I just, if you go okay, if I ask you another few questions, there's quite a lot coming in about training zones. Can I ask you a little bit about that?
I'm on it. Let's go. It's Friday.
Okay, good. So so Mike has asked the question about in preparation phase. Is it a good idea to spend some time in zone 4 and 5 just to maintain a feel for race speed? And then somebody else has asked about, to clarify, is there any benefit at all of crossing the boundary between zone 1, 2, and 3 in a zone model? Or are the negative effects so great that it's better to stay well within zone 1 to make sure they don't cross into zone 2?
Okay.
So,
well, the first question,
two quite different questions.
Yeah. The first question, yeah, even during this early preparation phase, I do think, you know, there's nothing wrong with doing a bit of high intensity work, but you want to dose it carefully. What we see with high performance athletes is generally there's a better cost benefit ratio in zone 4 rather than going up into zone 5. There's just not a lot of need to go there very often, even though you race there in rowing. So yes, let's go ahead and let's hit zone 4, but and do some intervals, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't need to be right now in this early preparation. It may not be more than once, max twice a week, and keep it under control. And I would say, as I say to my daughter, you should leave the water, leave the track, knowing you could have done one more. Yeah, you don't want to bury your athlete with intervals right now at all. You want it to be kind of a tolerable, sustainable process. That's that. And then on the zone 1, 2, 3 issue, bear in mind, folks, there's nothing dangerous. There's nothing fundamentally poisonous about threshold training. So don't misunderstand me there or misunderstand this idea of polarized training. But the tendency that we have is that left without training discipline, without intensity discipline, that a lot of training sessions move into zone 3. So you have to use energy as a coach and as an athlete in your head to avoid that regression towards the middle zone. Okay. And so there's nothing poisonous about a single workout in the threshold, but what becomes kind of poisonous is if that's what's happening as a rule. And it easily does happen because of the competitive nature of your athletes, because they're kind of, you know, a period of minutes in zone 3 feels pretty good. So you've got to have the discipline to look at the bigger picture and decide, whether a little bit of that is okay, but and they're able to straighten up and do what they're supposed to the next day. So that's my feedback to you is, it's not poison, it's not scary, but it's the day in, day out failure to keep things disciplined and keep low intensity low and high intensity high that will get you in trouble, or get your athletes in trouble over time. It's not that single day, single workout where you say, let's play with all the zones today. Okay, that's all right. But then tomorrow you're going to have consequences. So you're going to have to keep that in mind.
Okay, so it's following something intense with something a much lower level then.
Yeah, for most, high performance athletes sometimes will do double hits. They'll do it 2 hard days in a row, and that may be in their developmental process. If it's a high performance athlete, that's probably appropriate because they're going to race 2 days in a row in the rowing tournaments that they go into. But for most of the time, you're going to be real careful how often you do these doubles. And especially with age group athletes and so forth, the cost benefit needs to be considered. And in general, it's a pretty costly to do 2 tough interval sessions back to back. So
okay.
we often have a flow of easy, hard, easy, hard, easy, easy, hard, probably.
Right, I'm going to ask you one more question, if that's okay, and then because we've run well over time, and thank you for your generosity on this. So Justine says that recent studies involving hydrogen being the pain component on the lactate buildup anomaly. How is that a change in the idea of exhalation in effort, exhalation on exertion, harder exhalation in recovery? So I think it's to do with the breathing, and if hydrogen is the pain component of the lactate buildup, should we be looking at how we're actually breathing in order to try to help with the recovery?
Well, for the first thing, rowing is one of these sports where your breathing it's called entrained on the rowing stroke. So, you basically cannot row out of phase with your breathing because of the fact that when you go into the catch, you're going to have this brief moment where you're going to almost hold your breath, because you're stabilizing your core. So breathing will end up in some kind of a phase relationship with the stroke rate. So if you're at a stroke rate of 30 and you're at low intensity, you may be breathing 15 times, every other 1 breath per 2 strokes, but there'll be a phase shift, and then you're at 40 strokes a minute during a race, and you're breathing twice a stroke. So there will always be some kind of a phase relationship between the breathing and the stroke, and you got to be cognizant of that. Now, one thing about ventilation that I want to share with you, I don't think that there's a lot you're going to want to do related to, that research. I don't think is going to change the way your athlete should be breathing. But I would say this, that there's been research in Norway related to the fact that when the athlete takes off up a hill, let's say you're running and you come to a hill, and the cost of running up that hill changes, your oxygen needs rapidly increase, but your ventilation change lags behind normally. There's a lag time before your brain perceives and accelerates the breathing to match the need. Well, if you know that, then you can do what we call anticipatory hyperventilation. And there's a guy here in Norway that's done a lot of work with this, and it works. And so you can literally train your athlete to over-breathe, over-ventilate at the start of a rowing race or when they're accelerating in anticipation of the increased oxygen need. So that's one aspect of this ventilation where the athlete can actually do something proactively with their breathing to try to help more rapidly eliminate hydrogen, like you were saying, eliminate the acidity or the extra CO2 is what actually is eliminated with the breathing. So that that kind of connects to what the question you were asking, is learning how to do this anticipatory hyperventilation, both at the start of a race and when you do, for example, intervals where you suddenly, you phase jump your power from 200 watts up to 350, where you just tell yourself, breathe hard, breathe harder, turn on the breathing, even before your brain would normally do it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Stephen. It's always fantastic to hear you. You've always got really great ideas and takes on things. I'm sorry we haven't been able to answer everybody's questions because there's still more coming in. But we do have some other physiology inputs, and I know some of them will be, you can also ask them some of these questions as well. Some of them are people that are probably known to you, Stephen. So
I looked at the schedule and I was so comfortable knowing all of the expertise there. So that was my feeling too, is these questions will get answered by the other experts to come. Yeah.
So thank you so much. And thank you for being great friends to World Rowing and to our coaches. And we look forward to seeing you at something else in the near future. So thank you.
Good luck. You guys are my favorite coaches. Keep it going. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks so much, everyone. Bye.